Now, at the time of his death 2 years ago today, David Bowie was collaborating on a book including many previously unseen photographs from his hugely successful Serious Moonlight tour of 1983. Bowie played to packed stadiums around the world on the back of his hit album Let's Dance, and following him both on stage and off was British photographer Dennis O'Regan. O'Regan's putting together a limited edition box set of 1,000 or so photographs plus other memorabilia called Ricochet for sale to collectors. Bowie completed at a suitably starry price of £3,000. A more affordable paperback will also appear. Dennis O'Regan's been telling Stephen Smith about the thrills and the stills of life on the road with David Bowie.
He would actively want me to photograph him the whole time. We all queued up for our bags and David had his trolley. And of course I didn't take any pictures, thinking this is boring. But he and his PA said, I think you should be capturing this. This isn't how you normally see David. I realised really quickly that they wanted me to capture virtually everything that he did. Arriving at the airport, surrounded as usual.
Dennis O'Regan went round the world with David Bowie. Private jet, 5-star hotels. A tough job, but somebody had to do it. He was photographer by appointment to the star on his all-conquering tour of 1983. The pair of them already had history.
I met David outside Olympic Studios in Barnes in West London when he was recording Diamond Dogs. And I was working in a newspaper shop, so I was still a teenager, working in a newspaper shop across the road. And some girls came into the shop giggling and asking to buy notebooks. So,
for his autograph?
To get his autograph. So I asked around and found out that's who it was. So I went home, got my camera and zipped back, or my uncle's camera actually, and zipped back, got some pictures of him walking into the studio. And then it was kind of, hello, you should work for NME sort of thing. And that was our first exchange.
Can I sit down here? No, I can't. I'll sit here then. About 2 days ago, EMI Records phoned me up in Australia and said, would I like to take a 25-hour flight back? Come and sit in a room with 75 journalists. Over the last year, I've completed an album and a single called Let's Dance. And tomorrow, tickets go on sale in the UK. And in the next few days in the rest of Europe for concert performance.
And as I opened up the dressing room door, David was facing me and the makeup girl was behind me. And I saw from her look that I was obviously in trouble for something. And David said, did you get it? Well, I said, well, get what? And he said, get out of my sight. so I still didn't know what I'd missed. And of course, it turned out that he got hugely mobbed at the backstage door and I wasn't there. To make up for that actual instance, David rented a car and organised a picnic and drove me and 2 other friends out for a picnic that he'd arranged in a wildlife nature reserve. The man off stage was very different to the persona that I'd seen of David Bowie on stage, which was very cool and detached, which is the very opposite of David, who's very warm, funny, engaging, self-deprecating. He laughed a huge amount.
Is that anywhere near accurate?
It's absolutely nowhere near accurate.
Can you give us a more accurate figure?
Of course not.
But I could do a book of David laughing.
Oh, you mean shots of him roaring away?
Yeah. He laughed on stage, he laughed a lot because he didn't have to play the Thin White Duke or Ziggy Stardust anymore, so he was allowed to laugh on stage. But he laughed all the time off stage as well. It's what he really wanted to spend his time doing, was having fun.
It was one of Bowie's biggest tours in support of a massive hit record. But is it true that he didn't care for it over much?
He was really proud of it. He was proud of the album, he was proud of the tour, proud of the show. And it also made him hugely rich. In the context then, when he looked back and put that into the context of everything else he did, it obviously wasn't as mean and dirty and culty as some of the other things he'd done. And to then look back and call it his Phil Collins period.
Is that what he described it as?
Yeah, later on, 20 years later, it suddenly became his Phil Collins period. But at the time, it was his peak.
I think now, in a world where everything is so visual and it's just inconceivable that you'd become a star without that visual aspect, it's perhaps hard for us to recognise that when Bowie started in the late 60s, that this was less of a concept, and he was very, very early onto that idea of fusing the visual and the music. He knew how important image was.
Just like that bluebird.
Once so accessible, the star became more reclusive in latter years following health problems. But O'Regan says he never stopped wanting to be David Bowie.
He'd made mistakes, but he'd learned from those mistakes. And for some of those mistakes and less popular parts of his career became part of that tapestry, part of that timeline. I think he was happy with that. I think he was very happy being David Bowie. But he wanted to be David Jones as well, and it was very difficult. Someone as famous as him and so distinctive. But he managed to disappear when he wanted to disappear.
Ain't that just like me?
Stephen Smith and David Bowie died 2 years ago today, and that is all we have time for tonight. But I'm back here tomorrow. Hope you are too. Good night from all of us.